This is the Church of St. Paul in the Desert.
May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be always acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. I kind of identify with the disciples on the road to Emmaus. Isn't it easy sometimes to be busy chatting about all the things that went wrong and all of the things that didn't work out and kibitzing with each other about it, and with a sense that if we just go over it again and again, it'll turn out differently, or because it's a lot more fun to talk about that kind of stuff than about anything that might be more positive. Well, they had a particular point of view. And I'm thinking especially today about that point of view that these disciples had. Point of view is a very important idea when you think about movies. There are movies where everything is done kind of from the narrator's point of view, and you're watching all the characters. And then there's others where there's different people who are at the center, and it's as if we're looking at the same situation through their eyes. We're getting a different point of view. Have you seen movies like that? One of my thinking is Crash. There's some other movies. Every one of us, every human being on earth has a different point of view. Think about that. All of us have a different point of view. When we think of things that are close to our hearts, when we think of politics, it's easy to kind of divide the world, at least the United States, into kind of 2 or maybe 3 sections. But the reality is every single one of us has a different point of view. Even within one general party or perspective, everybody in it has a different point of view. Why is that? It's because all of us perceive information differently. All of us were raised at least slightly differently from somebody else. And all of the things that have gone into making us who we are part of deciding how we see the world. Even what parts of the world we look at and what parts of the world we ignore. So we have these disciples with a particular point of view. And I would describe their point of view as very sad. They are dejected. Their hopes had been dashed, turned to dust. And so everything they were talking about was from the particular perspective of people who had given up hope. They were comforting each other. They weren't encouraging each other. They were playing, in seminary, in pastoral care, we talked about a game called playing Ain't It Awful. It's, where you listen to somebody who wants to vent, and you don't say yes, you don't say no, you just kind of say, wow, that's terrible. And people just keep talking, and I can just see them talking with each other like that. And then along comes Jesus. And Jesus has a different point of view. The disciples have the point of view from the cross, and that's what's really organizing everything. It probably includes the Thursday night when Jesus was handed over and they all ran away. It might include being at a distance where it was safe and watching Jesus die and be taken away. But Jesus has a different point of view, and his point of view is as one who is risen. He's been through everything that they looked at from a distance, but he's been through it up close, and he's on the other side. And so when he says to them, oh, how foolish and slow of heart you are to believe, I don't think it's so much him slapping them around as him really inviting them to gain a different point of view, to organize all the things that they know from a different perspective. Because they recounted for him all of the things that happened, right? And even though it doesn't list them here, even though it seems like a very long lesson, they didn't list everything they were talking about here. I bet they got most of the facts right. But all the facts they had were from the perspective of someone whose hope is dashed. And Jesus is saying, didn't you know that it had to be this way? Didn't you know that God had more of a plan than just leaving Jesus at the cross? Didn't you know that here's what you can look forward to? And then it says Jesus walked them through all of the scriptures, all of the things that connected to him, all of the ways in which God had reached out to God's people throughout that testimony of the scriptures, and seeing how God was still acting and still loving even now. What happened at the end of all that was they gathered for a meal. So those three people with their different points of view gathered around the table, and then Jesus didn't say anything necessarily. I mean, sure, he had to say some words to bless the bread, but he took the bread, he blessed it, he broke it, and he gave it to him. It was the action that they'd shared on that the night before he suffered. It was an action they'd probably shared numerous times before. It's an action we will share today and that we share regularly. And in that taking, blessing, breaking, and giving, those points of view came together. The disciples' point of view, which was based on hopelessness, was transformed. The risen Lord, having met them and having given them the perspective of one who has been through the terrible trials and come out on the other side and could point to where all of that was leading, in their meal together, they understood. Or at least they caught it. And they could see him for a moment, and then he vanished. And they took that transformed point of view, and they took it back to all the other disciples. Now, some folks think there might have been as many as 100 people gathered around. There were the 11 disciples, once you take away Judas, and there were the women who supported the group on their journey. There were other followers and everything else. So it was quite a crowd. And they listened to those folks' point of view, which had already had some experience with Jesus since the resurrection, and they were all excited, and they were all filled with hope. The key here is that the hopelessness was taking them away from all the people. It was taking them away from the mission of Jesus. It was taking them to a place of sadness and dejection. And when they met Jesus, when they heard that God had more in store than just leaving Jesus on the cross, they had their view transformed. They were filled with hope, and they began to share that very good news with everyone they met. Now, in our own lives, we have, as I said earlier, we can kind of get stuck in a particular point of view. It is now, what do they call them, sound bubbles or opinion bubbles, where traditionally these days, people in the United States tend to only listen to news that already supports what they already think. And so people who are on the right listen to right-leaning news, and people who are on the left listen to left-leaning news. All the things that just reaffirm the point of view they started with. And sometimes we bring this into our understanding about God. We begin to rebuild what Jesus did so that it starts to resemble our point of view. Jesus came to transform our points of view that we might be inspired and aim toward one that is welcoming and open to all. Now, that is a challenge for us. It's a challenge because no matter how welcoming I might be, I still see things in a particular way. But the experience with the disciples and Jesus on the road says that if we can stand outside ourselves a little bit, and if we can look and accept that, yes, I have a point of view, but it's a God-given point of view that everybody has. That doesn't mean God made my point of view right. Just says, God gives me a perspective. Jesus calls on me to listen to other perspectives, to look at them, to be a part of bringing in people to Jesus' mission of redeeming and restoring the world in his name. We can't do it if we stay camped out in limited point of view camps. We can't do it if we don't listen to people. We can't do it if we decide that everybody who thinks differently from us is evil or stupid. Jesus calls us to acknowledge our own personal foolishness and encourages us to look toward what God is calling us to. Now, this doesn't mean that important things that I thought were important and I really feel passionate about, doesn't mean those aren't important anymore. It just means that we attend to one another carefully and we advance our positions, we advance the truth that we believe God is leading us to without stepping on the necks of everybody who disagrees with us. We have a chance this morning to practice that. We have a congregation full of people with different points of view. Some of them more similar to others, some of them quite diametrically opposed. But as we share our offering, as the bread is taken, blessed, broken, and then shared, we come together and we have the opportunity to be transformed, changed, perhaps slightly, perhaps greatly. And our lives can begin to just inch more and more toward that Jesus point of view that is there to redeem the world and has called us to witness to God's hope, God's love, and God's goodness. Amen.